All right, so now we're going to get into our Super Bowl 59 preview. Of course, this matchup is featuring the Kansas City Chiefs seeking the first three-peat in NFL history against the Philadelphia Eagles in a rematch of Super Bowl 57. Joining me to discuss this exciting matchup are my good buddies Hazen Pierce and Justin Lurie. How we doing, boys?
I'm doing well, excited to be on the podcast and talk some football with you boys.
What's up? Definitely doing well. I'm excited to talk football and let's analyze this matchup. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Super exciting matchup, obviously. So let's just kind of get into it right away. First thing we're going to start off with is an X factor for each team. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs first. Hayes, who are you looking at for the Chiefs?
So the Chiefs, I would say probably Xavier Worthy. He's good at stretching out defenses, which has been a big issue for the Eagles defense this year. And he's a shifty weapon. And I think because he's not going to be the main focus for the Eagles defense, he's going to have a lot of exciting plays that will surprise the Chiefs defense, whether it's a jet sweep or they lined him up one on one. I think he could be a big difference maker for their offense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me, my biggest X factor for the Chiefs is going to be Joe Tooney. I think kicking him out to the outside and having him play tackle is going to be big for them. One of the main things that's going to be vital to their success as they attempt a three-peat is going to be keeping Mahomes comfortable in the pocket. If you think back to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl when they lost that game, one of the issues was that Mahomes was rushed in the pocket. He didn't necessarily have time to set his feet, and some of his throws were more off platform than traditional, even for Mahomes. So I think that kicking Tooney out to the outside and providing some stability for the line hopefully will allow Mahomes to stay more comfortable and see if the Chiefs can three-peat.
I definitely agree. That'll be big for them.
I think those are two good ones. I'm more so looking at a defensive player, specifically Chris Jones. He's been the Chiefs' best pass rusher over the last several years. He made first team All Pro again this year. He has 19 solo tackles and 20 QB hits, 5 sacks on the year. However, he has had a little bit of a quiet playoffs, only having one solo tackle in the two games the Chiefs have played so far. But he'll be massive in terms of putting pressure on Hurts and making him uncomfortable in the pocket, as well as stopping the Eagles' explosive run game with Saquon Barkley. So I really think if he can have a big game, it can really swing things in the Chiefs' favor. And I think it will be extremely decisive for him to step up in this big moment, as we've seen him do in the past with multiple Super Bowl wins. All right, switching gears to the Eagles. Hayes, who are you looking at for the Eagles as an X factor?
I'm looking at Devontae Smith. He's known for making big plays in crucial moments, even when he's not performing at his best. And kind of similar to Xavier Worthy, he's not going to be the main focus on that offense. They have AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert's had a big year for them, and obviously Saquon out of the backfield for the receiving game, and he's also one of the shiftiest players in the league, I think. So it could catch the Eagles defense off guard a lot, and I'm excited to see what he can do against their defense.
Yeah, no, I think Hayes, that's a great point. Similar to you, I think Eagles receivers are going to be vital in this game, and because of that, my biggest X factor for the Eagles is going to be AJ Brown. On the season, he had 1,079 yards, 67 total receptions, and 7 touchdowns. While he only has 120 playoff yards for 9 receptions so far this playoffs, I think he's going to be vital to the Eagles' success, and I think he's bound to have a big game because of his success this season and his past in his career.
Yeah, I
I
definitely
agree.
definitely agree with you guys, and sort of sticking to a similar point in terms of the Eagles' passing game. I'm gonna go with Dallas Goddard. I really feel like the Eagles need to switch up their attack a little bit. Obviously, their run game has been their main strength, but when you look at the Chiefs' defense, if you have to point out a weakness, it would be their pass defense. So I definitely think getting some of their receivers or tight ends involved with Dallas Goddard would be massive. And specifically, the Chiefs actually have the worst ranked defense against tight ends. So I think Goddard's presence will be massive in this game. And if the Eagles end up pulling off an upset, I think we're going to see Goddard have a really big game. Additionally, he has been their number one target in the playoffs. So I really think it's very likely that we'll see him step up and have another big game here in the Super Bowl.
Definitely. Definitely.
All right, and now switching gears a little bit, just thinking about where both teams have advantages. This could be a position group, this could be coaching, really whatever you guys think. Where do you think the Chiefs have an advantage in this matchup here, Hayes?
I would say their overall coaching staff, their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, has had a lot of success with them and on the Giants specifically. He is the most successful assistant coach in all of football. He has 4 Super Bowls, which leads all of assistant coaches, and he's caused a lot of issues for offenses this year. If you notice, a lot of low scoring games, a lot of close games. He's been a big difference maker for that coaching staff. And obviously, you can't forget about Andy Reid, most successful head coach in the past couple of seasons. For current active coaches, he leads them all in regular season and playoff wins. And I think he's really looking forward to that three-peat opportunity.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I was thinking between my two picks here, the Chiefs coaching staff was my other pick, so I absolutely agree with that, Hayes. But I think this is an obvious answer, but the advantage for the Chiefs has to go to the quarterback in Mahomes. He has a 17-3 overall playoff record. He is 3-1 in Super Bowls total. His playoff career stats: he's thrown for over 5,500 yards. He has 43 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's won the last 2 Super Bowls, something that no other quarterback can currently say right now playing in the league. And just because of that, I think you have to kind of believe when Mahomes is on the field that he's going to make a dominant impact. So I think he's going to be key and ultimately be the Chiefs' advantage here.
Very impressive numbers right there from a young quarterback. Very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just look at their quarterback and coaching staff, and I feel like that both of those points really stand well, and it's a massive advantage for the Chiefs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, how can you bet against a guy like that? Andy Reid. I mean, there's just so much experience with the Chiefs team. It's incredible. I'm gonna go with Chiefs defensive line though. I really think this is a defensive line that's tailor made to stop the Eagles' run heavy attack. They have the fourth highest blitz rate in the league and the highest QB knockdown rate. I think they're going to make things really uncomfortable for Hurts. I think they're going to be able to contain Barkley a little bit. I'm still expecting him to get his own because he is the best running back in the league and have a pretty solid game. But if there's a defense that can stop this Eagles run heavy approach, I definitely think it's the Chiefs. And I think that they're really built to go against teams like this on the run. So I'm looking at the Chiefs defensive line, and I think that's going to be a huge advantage for them.
Definitely.
For sure.
Next up, let's get into our Eagles advantage.
Yeah, I would say their run game, specifically Saquon Barkley, he's a game changer. I know that the most being a Giants fan. Sucks to see him go, but he's having one of the best seasons for a running back in NFL history, which is just crazy. The Eagles wouldn't be competing for a Super Bowl without him. If they didn't have him, they wouldn't even be here. And because of that, I think he's arguably the MVP, and when he's on the field, he's very dangerous. So that's something that the Chiefs need to focus their defensive game on for sure.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. How can you bet against Saquon Barkley? I mean, he's been dominant throughout his entire career, but especially this season, he's been on a different course. For me, I think the biggest advantage for the Eagles is going to be their defensive line. I think that Tooney lining up on the outside is going to lead to some interior pressure, leading to some potential discomfort from Mahomes, specifically at the feet and low leg area. I think, as mentioned before, that the Bucks, when they won that Super Bowl, one of the main things that they were able to do that caused their success was getting to Mahomes, making him uncomfortable in the pocket. And I think that while the outside should be solidified with Tooney, I think the threat of Jalen Carter lining up on the interior could be dangerous and potentially lead to a similar result, as I said, with the Bucks, where Mahomes could potentially be feeling some discomfort in the pocket and potentially make some un-Mahomes-like decisions.
Definitely. They're going to need Creed Humphrey to have a big game for them at center, matching up against Jalen Carter. Maybe even send in a double team once in a while.
Yeah, if you can't solidify the inside, it's going to be tough.
Definitely. Definitely.
For sure, yeah. I think you guys both had really good points there. When you look at these teams, I think it's really interesting just to think about how they're really tailor-made in some ways to stop each other. So I think that's going to make for a really close game and specifically a defensive-minded game. I'm also looking at the Eagles' defense, but I'm looking at their secondary. They had the second best passing defense in the league during the regular season, third best against receivers, and best against tight ends. So I really think they're built to stop some of the Chiefs' weapons, especially with how much they like to use Travis Kelce and even Noah Gray in the passing game as tight ends. And then you look at a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, he's had a little bit of a slower playoffs. I think you can sort of take him out of the game. Xavier Worthy, as you mentioned earlier, Hayes, I think he's going to be a real difference maker for the Chiefs potentially if they can get him going. They might have to use him in a little bit of a different way just because this Eagles secondary is so strong. I think it's going to be a real advantage for them just to really take away the passing game a little bit. Chiefs haven't been the most explosive offense, which is kind of different from what we've seen in years past. So I really do think that bodes well for the Eagles in several ways.
Definitely. I feel like their defense, the Eagles' defense, is definitely going to also have to bracket Travis Kelce. You know, they like to use him in the middle of the field a lot, whether it's just stopping and play or going down in a seam route. They're really going to have to bracket him and put a couple players around him to stop him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And we've really talked a lot about defense throughout the show so far. So we'll get into this a little bit later with our final predictions. But how much of a defensive minded game do you guys anticipate this being? And could you see it being a little bit more of a low scoring Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a lot more low scoring than the last one. I think they also have played each other a couple times since the last Super Bowl, so they've gotten used to their offensive instincts. And like we said, the Chiefs' main focus will be stopping Saquon and containing him. And for the Eagles, they're going to have to stop Kelsey and their other options like Worthy, you know?
100%. I think because of all the different explosive threats on the field between Kansas City, look at, as Hazen mentioned, Worthy, even Hopkins, who I don't think anyone's mentioned. I think he has 13 playoff yards this season. Um, but he's someone you get the right route for him. He finds a little open space. He could potentially dominate the field or make a big play to shift momentum. Between Saquon, Goddard, Smith, A.J. Brown, I think there's a lot of threats on the field. And because of that, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think that these teams, in order to win, might need to kind of outshoot each other. And like I said, with all the threats on offense, while there are a bunch on defense, I think it could lead to a higher scoring game.
I think Hopkins could be bound to have a big game considering he's only had 13 receiving yards this playoffs. I don't think the Eagles are going to be fully like working on stopping him. They're going to be mainly focused on Mahomes, Kelsey, and Worthy. So I can see Hopkins also having a big game for them, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, despite these offenses not necessarily being the most explosive in the passing game and the Chiefs' run game has struggled just a little bit, I really do think the weapons and the talent is there. So I do think that could lend itself to a higher scoring game potentially. But when I look at these defenses, I really do think they're in many ways built to stop each other. And I do think that might result in a little bit of a lower scoring game than many people are thinking. I believe the line is set to over under 48 and a half total points. I could definitely see the under coming in. Like I said, a little bit more of a defensive minded game overall. Sort of on a similar note, what is your guys' favorite player prop?
Definitely Kareem Hunt anytime touchdown. You know, ever since Pacheco has come back, he hasn't been the same. And Kareem Hunt's pretty much been their workhorse for them in the red zone. You know, every time they make it to the red zone, he's their first option of giving him the ball. And I can see him continuing the dominance and getting more carries and attempts than Pacheco just because he's had an off season with injuries and just not being the same. And I can see him not even just scoring one, but maybe even two touchdowns.
I definitely agree with that. I think Kareem Hunt is going to have to be vital to their success. He's shown he can do this before in the playoffs. He's been here before, and yeah, if they're going to win this game, he's definitely going to have to come up big. For me, my player prop that I like is Dallas Goddard over for yardage. Um, it's set at 52 and a half, and on the season, he averages 52.6. On the season, the Chiefs tend to give up 6 receptions for around roughly 67 yards to tight ends. And because of that, I believe Goddard will have a big game. I think also for the Eagles to stay in this game, and if they want to win, Goddard's going to have to become big. And I think he's going to be vital to their success if they want to win this game on Sunday.
I agree. I think Goddard has been Hertz's favorite target the past couple of weeks. You know, this might be biased, but I think Hertz is big at checking down the ball, which is why Goddard and Barkley get a lot of receiving yards. Brown and Smith don't get many receptions. They just get big gains, yards after catch. So I think Goddard will definitely be the biggest target for Hertz this game.
Similar to the checkdowns you just mentioned, there's another great line out there. Saquon Barkley for receptions, or sorry, not for receptions, for yardage, set at 13 and a half. So if you like what Hayes is saying about the checkdowns, that could definitely be a good line to take a look at.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
pretty low too.
Oh yeah,
That's
no,
pretty
for sure.
low.
I believe it was like 268 yards on the season for receptions for yardage for Saquon. So it's definitely a lower number.
Yeah, for sure. I think you guys brought up some good points. I talked about Goddard earlier, and like I said before, I really think if the Eagles are going to win this game and keep it close, even, I think Goddard's going to have a massive game. So I definitely like that line. I also like your line with the anytime touchdown for Hunt Hayes. Quick question: how often you mentioned him in the red zone? He's obviously been a big red zone threat. How much of an impact do you think he's going to make, just sort of as an every down running back, specifically against this really strong Eagles defense?
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs, especially early on in the game, they like to focus on run heavy offense. So I think they'll use him a lot at the beginning of the game. And like I said, every time they're in the red zone, they either pull out a weird formation to get him involved, or they just give him the ball the first couple of times and then change it up. They can even use him in the passing game in the red zone. I think he's a better receiving running back than Pacheco. So a lot of options for him in the red zone, and I think he can get a couple touchdowns for them.
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely see that happen. And I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy. You mentioned him earlier, Hayes. I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy over 1.5 rushing attempts. He's hit that line in 4 of the last 5 games. And just sort of the nature of this Eagles defense, I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to pass it as much. So I think we're going to see some trick plays from them, a couple of jet sweeps, definitely. And that's sort of Xavier Worthy's bread and butter, really. And I think if he breaks out for a big first down, they're going to go to him again and give him another rushing attempt. I just see that trick play really working nicely. I mean, we've seen Andy Reid really likes to sort of call some trick plays in the Super Bowl and in big games just to throw the opponents off, and I think that's what we're going to see on Sunday with Xavier Worthy.
Definitely. There's just so many options you can use him with. You can line him up on the outside, line him up in the backfield, wildcat. There's just so many potential options for him.
It's the last game of the year. Now is the time you bring out all the stops. There's no more week whatever. It's done after this. So you're going to bring out everything to try to win this game.
Especially with Rasheed Rice out for them the whole season, Worthy's been pretty much a replacement for him in the backfield and in receiving. So, yeah, very important option for them.
Yeah, and just another note, you sort of mentioned this one earlier, Hayes, when you were talking about Worthy as your X factor. Earlier in the season, the Eagles, excuse me, gave up a really big game to Jaden Reed, and I just see Worthy as a very similar player to Reed. They gave up over 130 receiving yards, but then they also gave up a good amount of rushing yards to Reed. So I could see him being used in a similar way and sort of tilting the game in the Chiefs' favor.
Definitely two very explosive, fast players. I mean, there's a reason he broke the record for 40-yard dash at the combine. A lot of people have him compared to Tyreek Hill when they first drafted him. That's why I was surprised when the Bills passed up on him, and he showed him in the conference championship.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, getting into our final prediction, who are you guys picking to win this game ultimately? Give me a score prediction as well, and then just quick explanation.
So I will be having the Chiefs three-peat and beating the Eagles 28-24. I think they outweigh the Eagles pretty much everywhere. The most important thing being coaching. Reed has the experience, so does Spagnola and Kellen Moore and Sirianni. I just don't think they'll expect what's about to come to them. And I think it'll be a close game, but I think with yards and possession time, I think the Chiefs will dominate them.
Hey, I love your score. So, funny enough, I have it flipped. I have the score 28 Eagles, 24 Chiefs. I do not think they're going to three-peat. Well, I think you brought up a bunch of great points, Hayes. No team has ever three-peated before. Maybe this is the New England fan in me coming out, but it hasn't been done. It's obviously a very difficult thing to do. I think that this is the most depleted of the three Chiefs teams that has been to the Super Bowl. And I think while the Chiefs have been amazing in clutch time, even the greats, Brady, there's times where you have a little hiccup, and I feel like one of those times it's bound to happen. So because of that, I think the Eagles are going to pull this one out.
It's understandable. It's understandable.
I'm going to be going with the Chiefs. Like I said earlier, I really do think this is going to be a defensive minded game. I'm going to go with a little bit of a lower score. I'm going to go 23-17. I think the Chiefs, I just really like this spot for them. They've been here so many times before, and it's really just it's hard for me to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in this situation. I did it last year, immediately regretted it, and I'm not making that mistake again. So I'm rolling with the Chiefs, lower scoring game. I really just think they can control the tempo and the pace of the game really well, and that's something they do an incredible job of. Eagles team, it's a little bit more inexperienced, even as much talent as they have defensively. Not a ton of experience. I think that will hurt them. And then, like we were talking about earlier, the quarterback coach advantage is just so crucial to me. I really can't pick against Mahomes and Reid in this situation, and it's really hard for me to see the Chiefs losing a close game just because we haven't seen it at all this year. The one loss they did, or they had two losses in the regular season. They lost to the Bills by 10 points earlier in the season, and then Week 18, they lost to the Broncos when they rested all their starters. So essentially, one loss in the season. Whenever they're in clutch games, they just seem to find a way to pull it out, and I can't see that not happening on Sunday, to be honest with you.
I agree. They've been really dominant in like we said, it's going to be a close game, low scoring. They've been dominant in close games. Eagles haven't. A lot of their wins were blowouts. And yeah, I think the Chiefs will just dominate them this game, personally.
Truthfully, I will say though, you brought up great points with Reed and Mahomes. Sirianni is a little bit of a question mark. While I still think the Eagles will win this game, it's definitely a reservation of mine. It's something you have to keep in the back of your mind that Sirianni is on the sidelines compared to you look over across the field and you have Andy Reid over there. There's definitely a coaching advantage.
Yeah, I feel like the Chiefs are good at battling adversity and making adjustments. And Sirianni has shown all throughout his career that when they go down or they're struggling, he doesn't make the adjustments well. And I think that will really be a struggle in a Super Bowl game. So yeah,
But if Saquon can get them off to an early lead similar to the NFC Championship game, we can see what happens. But I definitely think it's a good point.
Yeah, and
definitely.
then just two quick questions for you, Justin. Sort of with Hertz, you mentioned Sirianni. How much confidence do you have in Hertz to have a big game and not maybe outplay Mahomes because that's extremely difficult to do, but obviously you're picking them to win. So, what sort of impact do you see from Hertz on Sunday? And then my next question for you is: do you see a scenario just because the Chiefs have been so good in close games where the Eagles are able to win this game, but it's more of a blowout as they've done throughout most of the year?
Yeah, no, I think those are two fair questions. I'll answer the Hurts ones first. Jalen, as Hayes mentioned, the check down is a big part of his game, but I think when the offense is designed with explosive threats such as Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, even if the ball needs to be checked down and there's pressure, I think if you get the ball in their hands, things are bound to happen. So I think that's going to be critical to Hurts's potential success in this game. Hurts has also only thrown two career playoff interceptions. Granted, he's played a lot less playoff football than Mahomes, but he has been here before. So he's not walking into this situation for the first time.
I think. I think his check down game will be a struggle against the Chiefs. I think this is the toughest defense to match up with that style of play, with the pressure that they're going to get from Jones and Karlaftis, and they have one of the best linebackers in rushing defense and covering, which is Nick Bolton. He could have won Super Bowl MVP last year. I think he's going to have a big game for them, and they're going to have a spy on Hurts and Barkley with him, and I think he's the perfect matchup against them. But I like your argument definitely.
We'll see what Kellen Moore can draw up here. This could potentially be his last game in Philly, so you'd want to pull out all
True.
the stops. Potentially could be a head coach next year. So let's see what you got.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you brought up a good point about Hurts. Only two interceptions, like you said. But also, you look back to Super Bowl 57, and he really had a strong performance. I don't put that Super Bowl on him at all, as much as I sort of have doubts about Hurts, specifically this year. I don't think he's been as good. But when you look back to 2 years ago, he did do it against the Chiefs. He got them down to that last possession. They ended up only losing by three. And he had an excellent game. To me, that game is more so on Sirianni and a little bit of the Eagles' defense 2 years ago. But Hurts, like you said, he has shown that he can do it at the biggest moments, so it's definitely possible.
Vic Fangio on the sidelines, I think, is another huge difference. He's a decent coordinator, pretty good coordinator. So we'll see if, as you mentioned, they lost by three in Super Bowl 57. If maybe Fangio being in here, Saquon on the sidelines, that can make a difference and make up those 3 points.
For sure. And
Definitely.
then sort of my question earlier was, do you see that there being a scenario where the Eagles actually blow them out just because the Eagles have been so dominant this year and most of the games they have won have been by double digits? And sort of as we were talking about earlier and throughout the episode, the Chiefs are just so hard to beat in close games. So do you see a scenario where the Eagles win by maybe double digit points?
Double digits, I don't believe so. I think for them to win this game, it's going to be vital that they jump out to an early lead. I think they are going to need to control the clock. I think when you have Saquon Barkley on your side, that is something that is easier to do than maybe some of the other teams in the NFL. You guys brought up great points with the Chiefs' defensive line, and this is 100% probably the toughest defense they've faced this year. But I think having Saquon will make a big difference, as I mentioned, controlling the ball. And then to your other point about close games with the Chiefs, they have been super successful in those. It's no secret they've been dominant. But I believe that if the Eagles are able to jump out to an early lead and the Chiefs are playing from behind and have to play catch up, the scoreboard might be closer than how it really feels on the field. And that's how I believe the Eagles could fight off the Chiefs and still win, even if it remains a close game on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really good blueprint for them to win, just jumping out to that early lead, controlling the possession, like you said, and then ultimately you really just don't want to give Mahomes a chance to close out the game at the end if it's a 4 point game or something. So ideally, the Eagles get the ball in the last drive and just close it out there. So I definitely think that's plausible. Hayes, as a massive Philadelphia Eagles hater, what percent chance would you give them to win?
I'll say 40. I'll give him a 40% chance. I think it's going to come down, like we said, it's going to be a close game, but I think it's going to come down to the coaching. And it's so hard to beat arguably the best coach of all time and definitely the best assistant coach of all time. Like I said earlier, 4 Super Bowls. No other assistant coach has done that. And he's shown that with close games this year. So I think I'll give him a 40% chance to win, but I think the Chiefs are heavily favored, especially for my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I'm honestly surprised you went up to 40. I wasn't expecting that, to be
Me
completely
too.
honest
Me
with you,
too. I'm
but
not gonna lie.
I do think
That's-
that's realistic, for sure. I think it's also interesting just to look at the overall line. Chiefs are minus 1.5 point favorites. Personally, I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit. I get how dominant the Eagles have been, and I certainly give them a chance in this game. But when I look at that line, I'm like, we're really gonna disrespect and doubt Mahomes again, especially considering the last 2 years he hasn't had the same weapons he's had this year. I know the offense hasn't totally looked the same. Took him a while into the season just to break 30 points. However, when you look at the talent and the weapons, it's certainly better than the last 2 years. So I really think that's a little bit disrespectful to Mahomes and the Chiefs, especially coming off 2 Super Bowls. What are your
Yeah,
guys' thoughts on that?
and stuff like that motivates him, you know? Like he takes all that stuff personal. He knows what people are saying about them, thinking they're not going to three-peat. It's never happened before. He said it after the Super Bowl last year, right after they won. He's like, I don't care about this. I want the three-peat. And I haven't seen a player react that quick after winning the hardest championship to win in sports. And I think all this hate motivates him, and he's just such a competitor. And I think it's just going to be a different story, the Super Bowl for him.
Can I pose a quick question real quick? Well, first off, let me just say, Hayes, I'm shocked that the percentage is as high as it is. As Cassel said, I love it. My second thing is if we take quarterback Patrick Mahomes, undisputably the best player on the field, out of this and you look at the strictly offenses, if you want to redraft, you could argue possibly that the top three of the four players redrafted would go to the Philadelphia Eagles. Between Saquon Barkley, I would give the edge to the Chiefs and Travis Kelsey. I would honestly, at this point, take Devontae or A.J. Brown to line up for me over any of the Chiefs receivers. And I think having that edge, as great as Mahomes is going to be critical to this game.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more important of how they're used, though. Like Andy Reid can make anyone around him better. He's shown it with a lot of his Noah Gray, great second option at tight end, probably the best second tight end on any team in the NFL. He's just great at making players on his roster good, no matter who it is. And I think that's an edge compared to what Sirianni can do. I feel like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith could have better years on other teams, but Sirianni's just slowed them down with their style of play.
They're definitely valid points.
For sure. And Justin, you mentioned earlier your biggest reservation with picking the Eagles is Sirianni. Hayes, do you have a biggest reservation with picking the Chiefs, or are you just totally confident?
I'm confident. Like coaching in the playoffs is, like I said, the most important thing. You know, experience, the way his teams use, I think it edges out what the Eagles are going to do. Even if the Eagles had a better roster, it just Sirianni has shown he's not a clutch coach and he can't make adjustments. I just can't see it going their way this game.
That's definitely understandable. I was just curious if you thought any of the advantages we talked about earlier could potentially sway you, just not just a little bit towards the Eagles side, especially with the 40% chance you gave them to win. But definitely understandable. And I definitely agree with you. As I said before, I just think the coach and quarterback advantage is going to be too much for the Eagles to overcome.
I think Barkley could maybe be the difference maker, but I think the Chiefs are just going to be so prepared to have a spy on him specifically and Dallas Goddard and all their short routes. I think it's Saquon will have a good game, but he's not going to put up the numbers he's did in past games, especially in the playoffs.
I think that was a great podcast. Thanks for joining me on the show. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we're just gonna wrap it up right here. Any closing thoughts on the Super Bowl? Anything else you guys want to say, or good to go?
I'm excited for the halftime show.
Me too. I've never been more
Really
excited for
excited.
a halftime show in my life. I usually hate that, but shout out to our boy Kendrick Lamar. It should be a
Yeah,
good
we'll
one.
actually watch it.
Exactly. I've never watched one before.
Be a good show. Let's fly, Eagles, fly.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Take care. Have a good one, boys.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. You too.